Hello Cloud Gurus, I'm Nick Triantafilou, and in the last episode, Scott challenged you all to think about different reward functions and strategies that you could use to train your DeepRacer car. Are you ready to put them to the test? Well, get ready because we're going to train our very first DeepRacer model. And as a bonus, I'll show you the method I used to get first place on the leaderboard at the Sydney AWS Summit. It's episode 4 of DeepRacer, the fast and the curious. So your bags are packed, you've boarded your flight, and you're on your way to reInvent to race for that elusive DeepRacer trophy. The only problem is, you don't have a model to race yet. Luckily, you have in-flight Wi-Fi and 15 hours to kill, so let's get to it. The model itself is a zip file produced by training your reward function in the DeepRacer console. Without it, the car will do nothing. So let's go and make one. The easiest way to get to the console is by visiting the DeepRacer League website, which is deepracerleague.com, and click Get Started with the AWS DeepRacer League. We're now in the DeepRacer console, let's click on Get Started. Okay, so there's an overview of the process we're going to go through right here. We're going to start with the create stage because we're creating our model. We're then going to train it and then evaluate it. Now the first thing we need to do is create our account resources. This gets your AWS account ready for training. It creates all the required account permissions and sets up the AWS resources that will be used to train the car for you, all in a single click. Step 1 can teach you the basics of reinforcement learning, which is optional. If you're new to machine learning, I recommend you check it out. I'll be jumping ahead to step 2, which is create model and race. So let's click on create model. Now we're in the create model page. The first thing you'll see is just a check that your account resources are created properly, and you can also reset them if you're having any issues. Next, we have a name for our model. Call it whatever you want. It doesn't appear anywhere except in the console for you to identify which model is which. A good naming convention expresses what the training is or what you're trying to achieve. I'm going to call mine Please Don't Hit the Wall. You can also add a description if you like, helpful when you've got a lot of models in your console. Scrolling down a bit more and we can pick the track we want to train on. So far at the summits, the reInvent track has been the track everyone is racing on. But who knows what will happen at reInvent and the summits in the future. I'll stick with this track for now, but it's a good idea to train on multiple tracks just so your model doesn't get used to very specific environments and situations. It needs to drive on whatever track you give it. Next, we have to select our action space. The car uses the camera to assess the scene and then has to make an action, whether it turns left or right or keeps going straight, and how fast it does that. The actions you define here are specific actions the car is allowed to take in the simulator and the real world. What this means is how fast it can go and how far it can turn left and right. As you can see, you're able to limit or increase the amount of options the car has in regard to steering and speed. In your actions, you can change the maximum steering angle from 1 to 30 degrees, and you have the options of 3, 5, and 7 steering angle granularity. If I change this setting, you can see it has more options on how far it can turn in an action. You can also set the maximum speed between 0.8 and 8 meters a second, and the speed granularity from 1 to 3. If you want your car to go fast around the track, then you need to train it for speed or it will never be rewarded for going fast. And then you won't go fast when you actually try and race. This is slightly different in the real world summit racing, where you get to control the speed of the car, but it still needs to know how to handle driving at speed. The actions you set will compile this action list, which shows what the car will train to do. Keep in mind, more actions will take longer to train. Now, we have our magical reward function. This is where you put all the code you meticulously copied from Scott's GitHub account, wrote yourself in aims of winning that amazing trophy. So AWS also provide you with some sample functions you can use right now if you haven't written your own, and I'll be using the default here as well. If you're familiar with Python, this shouldn't be too hard to read. We calculate 3 markers, the track width multiplied by 0.1, 0.25, and 0.5. And then we use these markers to determine if the car is further than the marker distance from the center of the track. The closer it is to the center, the higher reward we give it. It's that simple. So basically, if you train this model, it's going to give you a car that stays on the center of the track. It sounds good in theory and it should complete laps, but in my experience, it won't be very fast. Finally, we have the hyperparameters. These are some extra settings you can use to tune your training performance. They're a little bit scary in my opinion, and I won't go through them here because it's something Scott is covering in the next episode. But if you click the little info button next to the word hyperparameter, it'll give you a description of each option on the side of the page. Alright, we finish up by specifying our stop condition, which just means how long we want to train the model. The default is 1 hour, so feel free to do that to start off with. There's also a warning below stating the average cost that this will add to your AWS bill. The estimated cost of training is about $3.36 an hour, and with the free tier, you'll get $30 of service credits, so your first model creation is free. This can be pricey, so be sure to keep an eye on your bill. Let's click Start Training. Alright, now we're training. It says here it can take up to 6 minutes to initialize the training. This is so it can get all the background services like SageMaker, RoboMaker, S3 and Kinesis ready for you to start running the simulation. I'll give this a moment to start and then we'll see what happens as it trains. Okay, if you see this, then you're in luck. Your model is training. There's two parts to this. The left side shows the reward graph, which is simply a graph of the rewards that your reward function is producing each time a simulation is being run. We want this graph to be trending upwards, which means the car is getting a higher reward as the training continues to learn. On the right hand side, we're literally seeing what the car is seeing in the simulator and what it's using to make all of its decisions. You'll probably see it run off the track a few times before it starts making good progress around the track. There's not much more you can do now, so sit back and let your model do all the work. Once completed, you'll see a green bar and a notice saying you can now evaluate your model. An evaluation is like qualifying. You pick a track and the amount of trials or laps you want to attempt, and then it will show you your best results. This spins up a whole new environment, so it will take a bit of time if you want to try your model out, usually about 5 to 10 minutes in total. So I just ran mine and you can see my results here. This is after an hour of training. Of course, more training or different reward functions will always produce different results. Okay, so how do we race? First, we download the model, and you can do that with this button at the top of the page. Put the zip file onto a USB stick in a directory called Models. Walk to the DeepRacer arena at any of the AWS Summits or reInvent, fill out your entry details, hand your USB stick to one of the DeepRacer assistants, and get ready to race. You'll be handed an iPad where you get to control the speed. Everything else is left up to the model. Good luck! Oh yeah, I was going to tell you the foolproof way I used to get #1 on the leaderboard. At the Sydney Summit, I lined up early, got there first, got my model loaded, and voila, first place. It lasted about 30 seconds, but what a glorious 30 seconds they were. If you want to stay at the top though, that's going to take a bit more work. Now, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Alicia, who was able to interview the actual winners of the DeepRacer League at the Sydney AWS Summit. Maybe they can tell you how to get on top of the leaderboard and stay there. Over to you, Alicia.
Hello, Cloud Gurus. My name's Alicia, and I am the AWS Sydney Summit. We've just come from the DeepRacer track with our championship team. Congratulations, you were champions for the day, and also you got the second best timing of all the races thus far. That was 8.29 seconds. What an achievement. Do you have any tips for our students if they wanted to participate in the DeepRacer League?
The simulation is not the same as the real event, which we learned really early on. There's no substitute for testing as well. Don't get stuck on one model and bang your head against a wall, try a few things, tinker with the hyperparameters and experiment a bit.
Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't get tangled up in complex algorithms and functions. Stick with something that you've got, train it.
Fantastic, and that's all we have for you. Keep being awesome, Cloud Gurus.
Now, if you're super keen about machine learning and want to learn more, go check out our Certified Machine Learning Specialty course, only available on the Cloud Guru platform, where Scott and Brock will teach you everything you need to know about machine learning. One last thing I'd like to mention is that if you're interested in joining a DeepRacer community where you can discuss racing strategies and learn from the very best around the world, be sure to check out the AWS DeepRacer community Slack, available at join.deepracing.io. You can chat to me and actual winners of AWS Summits around the world. Okay, thanks for watching. Keep racing, Cloud Guru.